people want to join in after, that's cool as well. People have been popping in late to our workshops all week. So as we were saying before, this we are going to be recording this just so that students who have like time zone differences and any other like reasons that they can't be here, like some people have class right now, we wanted to make these workshops as accessible as possible to different students who are in different situations given the, you know, pandemic and everything. So if anyone's uncomfortable with this being recorded or does not want to be in the recording for any reason, feel free to just message us and we'll figure out other accommodations. You can message us directly if you'd like. So that being said, we'll get started. My name is Nicole. I'm the campaigns coordinator at the CSU, and this is one of our final workshops for Anti-Consumerism Week. So this is a workshop series that we have every year. We didn't have it last year because COVID hit right as we were planning the workshops, but we've been able to bounce back and have organized a virtual edition this year. So it's a lot of skill sharing, a lot of practical workshops. This workshop is going to be about like feeding yourself on a budget, which I know is like super, super like relevant to a lot of us, being, you know, full-time students and often living in poverty. And, you know, it can be very difficult to feed yourself like consistently when you're struggling with mental health issues and whatnot. So we have Tali with us today, who's going to be talking about that. So Tali, without further ado, I'll let you introduce yourself and get right into it.
Cool, thank you, Nicole. So hi everyone, I'm Tali. I don't have my pronouns in my little Zoom square, but I go by they, them. And I will start sharing my screen because I have a little presentation prepared. Can you all see this? Cool. Oh, there's a thing, hold on. Sorry, I'm just gonna fix something. So yeah, basically I was supposed to give this exact workshop last year as well. And then as Nicole mentioned, COVID hit. So I'm giving it this year instead. Okay. Should be good. Apologies for the wait. Okay, hello. Just checking once again. It's all good? Okay, cool. So this is my little introduction. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to give you several caveats about this workshop, and then just give you like a basic rundown of what the plan is. So as I mentioned, I'm Tali. I'm turning 24 years old this year. I'm in my last semester at Concordia studying geography, and kind of with like a focus on food studies and agriculture. That's always been my like interest. I currently work at Midnight Kitchen, which is a worker and volunteer run organization based out of McGill that aims to provide like free, accessible vegan meals to students and the surrounding Montreal community. And I've also worked quite a bit in different kitchens, like soup kitchens, nonprofits, co-ops, private kitchens, kind of a little bit of everything. So yeah, and all of these experiences have been in Montreal. So this is like where I'm from, where I was raised. And I'd also like to acknowledge that I'm on Unceded Kanien'kehá:ka territory. This island is known as Tiohtià:ke in the language of the Kanien'kehá:ka. We know it as Montreal. So this workshop is going to be a little bit Montreal centric, at least in terms of like the resources that I'm going to be providing. But in terms of like the more general tips on, you know, how to build your meals and like feed yourself is going to be hopefully relevant to everyone. So yeah, several caveats. I am obviously not a licensed nutritionist or mental health expert or anything of the sort. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt, pun not intended. and I do not claim to know everything about food or feeding yourself or being broke or being depressed. So I am very happy for you to tell me that I'm wrong and that I should change my perspective on things. And that's just a general, like, if you feel like interrupting me at any point during this workshop to ask a question or for clarification or for me to repeat myself or any accessibility needs, just let me know. And yeah, I think those are all my caveats. So the plan for this workshop, I want to give kind of a basic, like, try to get a basic understanding of what people's situations are like work and school-wise. I have a little bit planned explaining like basic meal nutrition and kind of like reframing how you think about feeding yourself, which I named Fighting Your Brain. And then I have a couple of slides on how to like build your own meals and think about it in terms of like meal templates that will basically help you feel like it's like feeding yourself is less of a chore. And then some general tips. And when I was making this workshop, I had a bit of difficulty trying to like accommodate for different levels of brokenness and depressedness. So I wasn't sure like how many resources to include, but I included some like cheap grocery, like a slide about cheap grocery stores and resources around Montreal. Those are more like food banks and different places that you can eat and shop that, you know, will save you money. And then some time for questions / interactivity if people are feeling up for it. So this is what's the Situate. And if people feel comfortable unmuting themselves and just like, I wanted to kind of get an idea for what people's like living situations are like, whether they're living alone, with like at home with family, with roommates. If with roommates, then how many? And you know, that kind of leads into, do you split your groceries? Do you cook meals for each other? There's a lot of different living situation setups that affect how you have access to food. So that was the reasoning behind that. And then these kind of like, you don't have to answer all of these questions. This is more just like gauging you know, where you're at kind of in terms of being a student and a worker, how many hours a week do you work, etc. If people feel comfortable talking about it.
I mean, I can try. I still live with my parents, so that's, you know, great for me. But I'm like, okay, I need to learn how to cook something, like, because I am gonna move out like pretty-ish soon. It's like what I'm thinking. So I can't cook at all. There you go.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. Is there anyone else who would like to share what their sitch is? If not, I'm gonna try to, Zach, did you wanna go?
Yeah, I could go. So I'm neurodivergent and have a lot of executive function like problems, which when you think about it, preparing a meal has so many steps, like acquiring the food, making sure the food doesn't go bad, making sure before the pandemic that you are home to cook the food has always been a struggle. And like, I'm a disabled student and I can't work like at the same time as going to school. So I rely on government funding and live with a bunch of roommates. Yeah, that's me.
Totally. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, this is exactly, this workshop is exactly for you.
I can go too if you want.
Yeah.
All right. So I used to be super poor. I am very lucky to no longer be super poor, but I do work full time. I go to school part time. And so that's, you know, it's a lot. So I often feel like I can't cook consistently and like eat at consistent times. And so I guess that's like where I'm at with this. I also like do struggle with depression and other mental health issues, which makes cooking sometimes not easy. I guess like my main issue is like consistency of eating.
Cool. Juliana raised their hand.
Hi, yeah, I guess I can go. Similar to Zach, like I have a lot of issues with like executive dysfunction. And then for me, like at least recently, I've been like transitioning medication. So like I've been dealing with like a lot of gnarly side effects, particularly like fatigue and like lack of motivation. So it's just, even though I love cooking, I've been having a hard time finding the motivation to cook.
Yeah, I extremely relate to that. So I can give my situation as well, which currently I'm living alone. I would normally be living with a partner, but they're stuck in the States right now, so I'm paying for groceries by myself. Up until recently, I was like just on government like CRB slash EI, but I recently, like I mentioned, got a job. So I've been working part-time, going to school part-time, have fluctuated greatly in terms of like my mental health over the past couple of years. Definitely have dealt with like large amounts of burnout, and cooking during those times was definitely a struggle. So that's why I wanted to bring this up. Oh, and Charlie from the chat, would you mind if I read out your blurb? Or yeah, okay, cool. So Charlie says that they live with their partner and are not working at the moment. Both of them struggle with mental health. Their budget depends on the financial aid that they receive, so they generally stock up when they have more money. They cook most of their meals and have a deep depression recipe. Yeah, we're gonna get to some spicy depression meals. Yeah, so this was all, this like little exercise was all to say that like what your living and working situation is obviously has a huge effect on your abilities to cook for yourself and feed yourself. If you have the option, say Isabel, I don't know if you're like considering moving in with roommates or not, but there's definitely ways to cut down on food costs if you're with roommates, like splitting groceries and at least the basics. Or like in my last living situation, we had like a on and off alternating, like we cook for like dinner for each other if we have the time. And that definitely like helps a lot when you're struggling to have someone to rely on. So yeah, okay, so this was that. So moving on to kind of a like basic meal nutrition guide. Once again, not a nutritionist. Do not, do not think I am like telling you exactly what to eat. My like philosophy about all of this is very like path of least resistance, and eat what you like, and it's better to eat anything than not to eat at all. So all to say, the point of this is not to have you like sit down and start like counting calories or anything like that. That's very much not what I would advocate for. So yes, that out of the way, every ingredient basically is made up of several elements, and they serve different functions in the body. And whereas you don't need to remember like each and every function, I think it's like important to kind of keep in the back of your head. This is going to come up when I talk about like meal planning, or not like meal building, what different elements of your meal is going to do for your body. So for example, carbs provide energy, and that's really important because if you're a student, and even if you're not a student, if you're a worker, if you're just like any human being, you need energy to do things, and to study and so on. So carbs are things like rice, pasta, noodles, tubers, which are potatoes, which are like made up of a lot of starch also. Then Another extremely important macronutrient are proteins, which I'm sure everyone kind of knows what they do. But just to underline the point, they're responsible for the growth and repair of tissue, and extremely important for your muscles. And those are things like tofu, eggs, poultry, fowl, cow, or pig. There are other sources of protein. This workshop is meant to be like, if you're vegan, like try to accommodate for as many diets as possible. And then there's micronutrients, which are also really important. Those come from things like broccoli, red pepper, tomatoes, stuff you don't like eat for the specific micronutrient, but they're also really important for your body. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I can send out these slides to everyone in case you don't want to take notes, which is totally fine. But yeah, so like, for example, something that would be good to know is that if you're depressed, your body produces less, retains less B12 and iron. So that's something that you might want to take note of, and like Google like what are foods that are rich in iron that I enjoy eating, or foods that are rich in B12, and try to like stock up on those when you can. So that's kind of like the purpose of the basic meal nutrition, just like kind of trying to like figure out what your body needs and getting that. And so the other part of the slide is kind of my tips for fighting your brain, which for me and for many depressed people means fighting executive dysfunction. And I can't give you a fix all, cure all solution, but I can like let you know what has worked for me. And so the first point I put there because I saw this like really cute comic online, and I thought it was actually really useful in terms of thinking of like how to battle executive dysfunction. And it's basically like to think of yourself as two different people, as like your present self and your future self. And so when you do either like meal prep or like do the dishes or clean or anything like that, you're not just doing it for your present self, but it's also like a favor to your future self. And so like a lot of people are conditioned to be mean to themselves and kind to others. And so I found that thinking of myself as like, oh, future Tally would appreciate if I, bought this thing, or if I cooked this, if I made enough dinner so that there are leftovers the next day so I didn't have to think about lunch, like that kind of thing. I found useful. And the second point is kind of, I've mentioned, the path of least resistance is my philosophy, which basically just means like wherever you're at with how much executive functioning you have and your ability to cook for yourself, just be kind to yourself and understand that if you try and like force yourself to do something that you can't do, it's not going to be helpful in the long run. So I'm much more in favor of things like forming really like healthy habits or rituals that make you feel good and like integrate things that you need to feed yourself into your daily routine, so it becomes like second nature and it doesn't feel as much of a chore. And I know that's like easier said than done, but it kind of is like it's cliche to say, but it's very like baby steps, incremental thing that you have to incorporate. And some of it is very conscious. Like, for example, I'm going to mention later, one of my big tips as someone with like ADHD and depression is making lists. I'm a huge fan of lists. So for cooking, that looks like I have a list for what I have in the fridge that needs to be used up, because I will just forget about it and it'll go bad, and that's a waste of money and food. I have a list for what I like need to buy. I have a list, list for what I'd like to cook, or like, something that inspires me that I want to try out. So yeah, that's my big tips are kind of like, make it as easy for yourself as possible to feed and, cook for yourself. So that's that. I don't know if people have questions now or if we can save them until the end. If not, I will keep going. So this is the more like, this is the more like practical part of the workshop, where I'm going to give you advice on how to like structure your meals. Once again, this is just what works for me. You can take anything out of this that you feel is useful. I'm sure everyone has like different tips for dealing with this, and I would be more than happy to hear them when we do our little activity. But yeah, so the way that I think about meals in my head is that for breakfast, I just think like there's like 3 slots in my head for different meals. And I just like, if I'm not having one, then I'm having the other, and that's it. I don't want to think about what I am going to eat for breakfast. For me, it's a very like, it's something I need to eat so that I can take my medication. I'm going to keep it the same because I know what I like. So for me, like, for example, I've had the past like 2 months, almost every single day for breakfast, the same exact thing, which is a bagel breakfast sandwich with like egg and tomato. And that's it. And like, I don't have to think about it. Like, I know what I need to get when I go to the grocery store because I know I'm just going to eat the same thing for breakfast every day. And that can obviously change depending on what your dietary restrictions are / what your tastes are. But I find it really helpful to just think of breakfast as like, you have 2 or 3 things that you like to eat, and try to make sure you have the ingredients to make them. Try to make sure they're like 5 to 10 minutes at most. For lunch, I mean, this, has definitely changed because of COVID, but like 90% of the time, my lunch is just left over from dinner. And I also, oh yeah, Zach says that they have a bagel every day as well. Exactly. It's really nice to have things that are like, there's like a base and then you can alternate toppings. Like bagel is a good example. Another example is I've been trying to eat more like yogurt and granola, and then you can just like change out whatever granola that you make or fruits or whatever you have available. But yes, sorry. So what I was saying about lunch is like 90% of the time I just have leftovers because I live alone. I don't know how to cook for one person. I'm a big like, I love cooking for people, and I don't have the opportunity to do that because of COVID. So instead, I just make like huge portions of soup or stew and freeze it, or just have it for lunch the next day. And that, like, knowing that the dinner I'm making that night is going to be my lunch the next day takes like a huge load off in terms of like, oh, that's like one thing that less that I have to think about in terms of planning like what I'm going to eat. But regardless, if I don't have leftovers, it's always something quick, something I can put together in like, 10 to 15 minutes. Yes. Is there a question in the chat? Yeah, exactly. Juliana agrees that it is hard to cook for one person. And so, right, so dinner is where I kind of focus the most of my like brain power in terms of planning to make a meal, because I think of it as like my reward at the end of the day if I had a long day at school or work. And sometimes it's really hard with people's schedules, because I remember I used to work evenings before at this different kitchen, and I would get home at like 9 p.m. and I absolutely did not have the energy to make myself, something nice. It would just be like ramen or whatever I had in the fridge. But because of COVID and luckily like my new job, I have evenings. So all to say, I prefer the structure of you know, having one meal a day that you focus most of your energy on. And that is the meal that I will look up recipes for. The other two meals, I honestly like I know exactly what I like, and I just like throw together whatever I have in the fridge. Dinner is the one meal that I will like look up a recipe, try and, you know, maybe experiment with something I haven't done before or cooked before. And it's nice. It feels like, for me, cooking is very therapeutic. I know for a lot of people it is as well. It's a very like tactile uh, activity. So it kind of like grounds you and centers you when you're in the zone. So yeah, that's kind of my philosophy there. And for snacks, I think definitely for me, it's about focusing on satisfying immediate needs. Don't feel guilty if you want to, you know, snack on something salty or greasy or sweet, whatever it is. It's just kind of a get yourself to the next meal intermediary step. The other like points I have here about building your own meals is ever since I saw Samin Nosrat's Salt, Acid, Fat, Heat, which came out as like a Netflix special last year, I also got her cookbook. It has honestly changed the way that I think about cooking. And whenever I'm making a meal, especially one that I'm not using a recipe to refer to, I think about what flavors are in the meal that need to be balanced. So for example, if I'm making a stir fry and I am coming up with this, like not coming, well, I'm making a sauce. I always make sure to include like a sweet element like honey or maple syrup or just brown sugar, a heat element, which is like red pepper or sriracha or, you know, chili oil, and salt, like a salty element. And this is the kind of thing that's like harder to teach, and this is more that something that comes with experience. But if you just like repeat in your head the mantra of salt, acid, fat, heat, and you know, maybe look up like what ingredients pair best with things that you know that you already like to eat, or stuff like that. That's kind of I think it will like make for more balanced meals that you will actually like want to eat, because a lot of like I find a lot of the anxiety I had about like cooking had to do with like, oh, what if I mess it up? What if it like doesn't taste good? Like I'm not even gonna, why would I even put effort into this? And so I started thinking about it as you're gonna have dinner every single night, hopefully. If you mess it up this one time, it's fine. If you like make something too salty, if you make it too sweet, you know, you could always, there's always ways to try and fix it. But even if it's, you know, turns out bad, it's fine because you can just try again tomorrow. And the other thing is I feel very passionately about the idea that we eat with our eyes. And I think making yourself a meal that looks good, for me, definitely affects my willingness to eat it. So I get excited about like, you know, little presentation, like flares, or, you know, putting it in a nice bowl. Like I have this bowl from the dollar store that just like looks pretty. And whenever I put food in it, I'm like, I want to eat this now. So it's very much like a craft. And this also depends on like what you have available to you. But yeah, I'm a big fan of like making making sure you want to eat what you need to eat. And the other part of building your own meals is having a balance of perishables and non-perishables. So there are many different like lists on the internet that are just like, you know, what you should keep in your pantry at all times. And I think most of us would probably think like, oh yes, it's good to always have like a thing of pasta or like a can of tomato, like crushed tomato or like stuff like that. But then it's also good to like supplement that with perishables. So that would be things like fruits and vegetables that can go bad, but like thinking about building your meal as a combination of stuff that you like already have in your pantry, like, you know, rice, for example, and then like fresh things that, you know, feel better, I guess, to eat, is another way of thinking about like how to structure your meals. And the last way I have of structuring your meals is like in my head, I have, I know meals that are like 5-minute meals. I have meals that are like 25-minute meals, and then there are like 45-minute meals. So a 5-minute meal is like a breakfast bagel where all I have to do is fry an egg, put it on the bagel, and that's a meal. A 25-minute meal is like a bit more involved. That would be something like put it like a stir fry, or like a curry or something like that. Something that's like involves some chopping and some effort, but not like a ridiculous amount. And that's more like a weekday dinner is a 25-minute meal for me. And 45-minute meals are like if I have extra energy on the weekend, or if I want to try something new, like a soup or a stew, or, you know, stuff like that. That's like a 45-minute meal. And so I think like a lot of setting yourself up for success with like being broke and having mental illness and wanting to feed yourself is having a repertoire of different meals for different like brain situations that you're in. And that way it'll be like easier to like, you know, make a decision about what you're going to eat for dinner, because it's just like a no-brainer. I'm feeling extremely tired. I don't have the energy to do anything. Let me pull out my 5-minute, like 5 to 10-minute meal. And then at least you will, you know, eat something and have a nice dinner. Whew, that's a lot of talking. So moving on to the meal templates themselves. This is kind of following from the last slide, which is also about like how to think about what is part of a meal. The like proteins, vegetables, carbs thing, it's more just to like I mentioned earlier, to keep in the back of your mind as like, if you're making, for example, if I'm making fried rice, I'm like, I have some some frozen veggies that I'm going to put into it, but then I'm like, oh, what's my protein? And sometimes it's an egg, sometimes it's tofu, sometimes if I have like chicken or something, then you can put that in as well. But just like when you're pulling things out of the fridge and your pantry to like make something, just having the thought of like, is there a protein in this meal? Is there like enough vegetables? Is there a carb? Because that links to the basic nutrition that I was talking about, and getting your body everything it needs to keep working. So yeah, so for example, I just wrote like creamy mushroom pasta. I don't know why, but it was just like the pasta is the carbs, the mushroom is the vegetable, the sauce would be like the protein. And so another kind of way to think about it is they're composite meals, and full or ready meals. So composite meal is like something like what you see on the right, which is I keep bringing up bagels. I'm a huge fan of bagels, where it's made up of like several smaller components. And so like a composite meal is, in my head, it feels like it's more involved, but it doesn't have to be. But it's basically like a bunch of side dishes centered around like a protein or a carb, versus something like a pasta dish or a stir fry, where everything kind of goes into one pot or pan, and there's a little less, you have to take a little less into consideration, like things like cooking times, because everything just goes into one dish and then you just eat that thing. But yeah, so that's something that I think about when I'm making meals as well. Is like, is this a composite? Is this a full meal? And so I love hearing stories about how people dress up their depression meals, because everyone has their own unique way of doing that. So here are just a couple that I put down. This is not exhaustive at all. But the like most basic example is like you have some instant ramen, and that's all you have to eat. But is there like something in your fridge that you can that you have that can make it like slightly nicer? So that would be something like a boiled egg, or some like seaweed, or green onions or herbs, or like anything that you have that will just make it feel nicer, like less like a pack of instant ramen. And yeah, so these are things I like to think about keeping in the fridge. Herbs are like one of those things that I always like buy because they're really cheap at the like grocery store around the corner from me, and then I'm like very optimistic about putting them in all my meals, and then they almost always dry up before I get a chance to use them all. Yeah, coriander and corn in ramen is great as well. Corn is definitely yes, I've done that. It's very good. But yeah, so again, I don't know if like now maybe like I don't know if people want to share what their like go-to depression dress up meal is. I would love to hear it.
I can go first, I guess. I've gotten really into Annie's mac and cheese. Like, I know it's a little more expensive than like no name stuff, but it tastes so much better. And I like to put like frozen vegetables, or like sometimes I'll pick up like some sausages or something and I'll cut them up. And it just makes it feel so much more filling.
Totally, that's a great example. Does anyone else want to share their pro tips?
I might have one to share. I guess it's when I really like, sometimes I just don't feel like I would want to eat anyways. So I found the easiest way is to make hot chocolate or like cacao. And I put like some cinnamon in it, and sometimes like other spices like cayenne, or like some milk, or like coconut milk. And yeah, it's pretty filling, even it's not a proper meal, but in the times where it's needed, it's a good help.
Yeah, totally. Zach says that they put tuna fish with ginger and mustard on top of a bagel. Love that. Tuna is a great thing to like cans of tuna are a great thing to have in the pantry to like dress up a depression meal. Yeah. Maybe I'll move on for now, but if people want to share later on, they will definitely have the chance to. But yeah, all to say, path of least resistance, also making something nice for yourself, even like with the least amount of effort possible. Now my general tips, which are kind of scattered, but I will just go through them one by one. I think it's really important to be realistic with yourself in terms of what your energy levels are and what your commitment is to making food. There are like definitely times where I was like, I'm gonna be one of those people who meal plans for the entire week and just like preps on a Sunday, and then I don't have to cook for the entire week. But that's just like completely not realistic with like what my schedule is like and what my energy levels are like. So yeah, that is definitely something to keep in mind. Also, it really helped me when I was in like the depths of depression to think about the phrase like 5% is better than 0%, which it again seems cliche, but it's better to eat, like to have some hot chocolate with some nice like cinnamon and milk than it is to like not have anything at all. So yeah. And then this is kind of tying into what I've talked about before, but having options for when you're feeling your worst. I always have frozen meals. Like I have my go-to is pierogies or just like any form of frozen dumplings. Extremely useful to have because there will be nights where even a like 5-minute meal is like not possible. So just having something that you absolutely do not need to have, not need to think about is extremely important. Yes, pierogies are great. And yeah, so frozen meals, I'm definitely pro. Frozen vegetables, just anyway, it's all good. Anything that like helps take the stress off. I asterisked and italicized lists because this is how I keep sane. Otherwise, I will just absolutely forget everything. And so there's like, you can write lists down on paper. My top tip is getting a little like whiteboard from the dollar store and putting it on your fridge. And that's where I put like, you know, you need to use up zucchini, or you like, you know, next time you go to the store, we're out of butter, or like something like that. And that's how I try and cut down on like wasting time, food, money, energy. Lists help a lot. The other thing I put down is to scout your grocery stores. When I lived downtown, I was like around the corner from the PA, and I remember it took me like several months to feel like comfortable going there because it was always really crowded. Because when I went like after school, which was during like the evening rush, so I am a fan of going to grocery stores more often and getting less stuff than doing one big shop for the whole week. And I find it helps you get to know your grocery store better. It helps you like, I found I'm more able to notice like when things go on sale or like when there's like deals and stuff, because I'm not just like wandering around in a haze and I kind of like know where to look for things and where things are. And I think that's really important, just like being able to like visually see where things are in your grocery store and, you know, where the deals are and stuff like that. So yeah, I was considering including like a graphic on how to store food properly, but I feel like that's a bit outside of the scope of this workshop, but it's extremely easy to find, like, you know, how to store herbs, how to store like, I always find my green onions dry out before anything else because I don't store them properly. But I think it's a big tip when you're like starting out to not feel frustrated with yourself, is like just knowing where things go. I, for the longest time, used to keep my potatoes in the fridge, figured out that's, you don't have to keep them in the fridge. And it's helped me basically stretch my food because it just doesn't go bad as quickly. And the most basic thing to think about is to try to keep your food away from moisture and light. So depending on what food it is, that could mean putting in the fridge, it could mean putting it in your pantry, in your freezer even. A top tip that I've definitely like seen for years, but I only started doing recently, is the herbs that I mentioned that I find are hard to use up because they come in like big bundles. I started putting them in like ice cube trays with like butter or like just water, and storing them in the freezer, so that if I'm like making something later, I can just like pop them out and, you know, it's less of a waste that way. And lastly, if you can, if you have the ability to invest in like time-saving appliances. By time-saving appliances, I mean my rice cooker has saved my life on multiple occasions. It is extremely nice to have, and they don't cost that much as well. I think they're like $20 to $25. What's it called? A pressure cooker. If you can get access to one of those, you can make a soup or stew in like 10 minutes with one of those, which is an extremely amazing time-saving appliance if you like need to make food and you don't have much time. And it's also like, absolutely do not be ashamed to use them and to cut corners where you can, because again, my philosophy is I'd rather you do it than not be able to do it. Another cool time-saving appliance I got recently is like a julienne peeler. I hate julienne and carrots, and it just like does it in like one go. It's amazing. We're living in a technological age, you know, you take advantage of it, is my thought. So that was kind of like the bulk of the workshop. The last couple of slides I have are just more like resources. So I made a list of like grocery stores that I know that are cheap. These are, again, extremely non-extensive and very much biased to the neighborhoods that I'm familiar with. But very often you're able to get like cheaper groceries at your local like ethnic grocery stores, or what's it called, like dépanneur and corner stores. But there's also some bigger stores that are known to have like good deals / cheap groceries. There's Siegel's. I wanted to just like give a quick anecdote, which is when I lived in St. Henry, St. Henry is a little bit of a food desert, and I lived in the part that like the closest grocery store to me was a 15-minute walk. And after a long day of school / work, I very much did not feel like taking a 15-minute walk to the closest grocery store. And it was an IGA too, so it was like very expensive. So I was lucky enough to be working across the street from Siegel's, which is infamously like has very cheap groceries. So what I would do was go after work and just like lug my groceries on my 40-minute commute home on the like the metro and bus, which is not ideal, but sometimes for me that was like less of a burden than, you know, walking to the nearest IGA. There's also PAs, which I'm sure you're familiar with if you're from Montreal. At Cavan, I think less people know about this. It's like also a chain, but I think it's mostly, there's some in like NDG, Côte des Neiges. I'm not too sure about the east side of the mountain, but it's great. Jangtu is a like Japanese / Korean supermarché. They have a lot of great like ready-made foods and a lot of different noodles. Euromarché is in Côte des Neiges. That one's more like Eastern European groceries. There's CNC in Verdun, Super C, and Obu in St. Henry is kind of like Costco, but you don't need a membership. But that one is, I would not recommend going there if you live alone, because it's just like Costco. They have things in like huge amounts, and it's really convenient if you're living with roommates. But anyway, all to say, there are many like resources available to find cheap grocery stores. These are the ones that came to mind. I'm sure people have other favorites. But yeah, finally, this is kind of a random resources, like first things that came to mind. I, as a lover of food, love watching YouTube videos of people making food, and I will sometimes put on videos of people making food as I am eating food. And yeah, I think it gives me a lot of inspiration. And these are just like some of, I just listed like some of the channels that I watch. Binging with Babish has a like specific show that's for like learning the basics of cooking, which I think is really good for people who are just starting out. There's a lot of different like people out there doing this. Oh yeah, and sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat. And yeah, I I feel like really excited about food and about trying new things. So I think YouTube is a great way to kind of see what other people are cooking. There's a lot of like what I eat in a day videos that's very popular. And yeah, there's also like blogs. The one I use like most often is called Just One Cookbook. That one is very much like Japanese food centered. And so whenever I feel like I cook a lot of East Asian inspired dishes. And so I refer to that blog a lot. Yeah. And then more like, I guess, practical resources. There are lots of food banks available in Montreal. The Depot in DG has if I open this, do you see this Google Drive? Okay, cool. Once again, I'm very happy to share these slides with anyone. But this just has a list of like community resources. There's an English and a French version for different groups around Montreal that have like food aid available. There's also Moisson Montréal, which is like the central food bank in Montreal, and that's where like us at Midnight Kitchen we get our like overstock groceries from them. But they have a food aid page, which I think I also linked here. Yeah, the 211 food aid, which has different like resources and links for stuff around Montreal. And then for more like campus specific stuff, sorry, I mentioned Midnight Kitchen so many times, but we're here. At Concordia, there's the People's Potato and Frigo Vert. I felt like I didn't want to just like list the like cheap places to eat around Concordia because I feel like that's maybe redundant slash like, I mean, I'm happy to share that as well. I just felt it was like kind of not exactly what this workshop was about. But yeah, again, not an exhaustive list. I'm sure I missed something, but this is just what I had in mind. And finally, I thought we could do an activity, which is like extremely simple. It's called a pass it on activity, but all that really means is like I'll start and you know, like reply to the questions, and then I'll like pick someone from the list to like pass it on to, and then they say their thing and then they pass it on to whomever. So if people are down, that's kind of like, I've been talking for like an hour straight and I feel like I haven't gotten a chance to hear from you all. So if people are down, I can start. I thought that we could talk about like what our relationship to food is, maybe like what our pantry staples are, like your favorite recipe or something to cook. Yes, I'm just gonna start. So God, I didn't even think about what my answer is gonna be. My relationship to food, I think I like have made it quite clear that I'm very passionate about food. My family is Eastern European Jewish, and I've like learned a lot of recipes from my mom that are very much that. And yeah, I think I was like pretty bad at cooking my first couple of years of university, and then like the past couple of years I've gotten like really into it, and like I mentioned have worked a lot in kitchens, and so yeah. I'm also a big fan of like urban agriculture and like growing food, so it's kind of like the whole food cycle is my thing. I'm gonna make it so that you don't have to answer all three questions. You can just answer one or two or three or however many you want. So if anyone, oh, right, I'm gonna pass it on to someone. I'm gonna pass it on to Juliana, if you're okay with
Yeah, I'm down to go. So I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with food. Like, I love to eat, I love to cook. Like, one of my big love languages is cooking for people. And like when I've lived with roommates in the past, I would always cook for them as long as they would clean up. That was my little way of getting out of chores. Um, some of my favorite pantry staples lately, I've been eating like a lot of udon noodles and making like fried noodles, and it's changed my life. I find they're just so satisfying, and it's like really easy to just like mix up which vegetables you throw in there. I always have carrots in my fridge because like roast carrots are super yummy, or like I said, like they're good to go into a stir fry or a stew or a curry. Like, made a weird curry with carrots in it the other day. I love like using a lot of like warming spices. So like I cook a lot of Indian and Asian and like Latin American food. Um, yeah, I can't think of any of my favorite recipes off the top of my head, but I like what you said about urban agriculture, Tally. I just moved into an apartment that has like a backyard and a front yard. So like I'm in the process of picking out which plants I want to grow this summer. So it's going to be my first endeavor into like growing my own food, and I'm really, really excited about it.
That's
Um,
extremely exciting.
Thank you. I guess I'll pass it off to Ada if you're comfortable. The only other person I know in the call.
Yeah, I'll go quickly because I have a meeting to go to for 30 minutes, and then I'll try to come back to this. What's the question? So, I also love cooking. I was like, I always dreamed to be a cook, but instead I chose, like, I basically was pressured into pursuing like academic education. So that's what I did instead. And now I'm finding my way back to food and like social and solidarity economy and stuff like that. My favorite pantry staple at the moment, I think I'm like you, Tally, in that I love dumplings on hand. I've discovered in the last couple months that like a really good like miso soup recipe where I basically just put the dumplings, it just take boiling water and then like some miso paste like the dumplings, and anything else goes. So that's really my favorite part. I'll pass it on to Isabel.
Hello. So I think I've already said it, like I still live with my parents and like they cook for me and that's great. Right now, like when they're not home, but like I just eat like cereal or like bread and I'm like, it's okay, I'll just like wait till they get home. But like now I'm gonna move out and I'm like, I can't just like either like eat out or have bread, like that's not sustainable. So we're gonna see how that goes. But yeah. As far as like my favorite recipes, my mom makes like such a good like fried rice and like any kind of like leftovers, no matter like what it is, if you're like, no, there's no way that that's gonna taste good, you don't even, it's gonna taste good. So yeah, it's really good. Bianca? Or Charlie?
If you don't want to go, that's totally fine. You could just skip.
Put it in the chat.
Yeah. Do you want to read it out? I can also read it out if you're not comfortable.
Okay, they say my favorite recipe right now is white sauce pasta. I make it with soy cream, nutritional yeast, full of B12, Gusta sausage, and whatever veggie I can find. I have a bunch of spice and dry herb that I use.
That's, yes, pasta is an absolute staple. Yes. Is there anyone else who would like to share? Sarah, maybe? Again, no pressure.
For me, I would just say that lately something that's been working for me is just oh, sorry, what your relationship to food is. I guess no, I even when I don't feel good mentally, I've never, unfortunately, I say that in kind of sarcastically, but I never lose my appetite. It's more about the energy that it takes to actually prepare a balanced meal that becomes difficult. But on a really regular basis, I try to make casseroles. And something that I've kind of learned to do is how to make, like, with one like casserole that you put in the oven, like all the different dishes that I can make, like whether it's rice and chicken, a pasta bake, stuff that I could all put everything in one dish and just let it cook. That works for me.
Yeah, I'm also a big fan of one pot meals. I'm absolutely terrible at doing my dishes. Every single time I'm like, I'm gonna do it as soon as I finish cooking, and then I'm like, I'm hungry, I'm gonna sit down and eat, and then they just never get done. So one pot meals are a big time and energy saver for me. I think that might be like everyone in the call probably has had a chance to talk.
I can go.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah, please.
Yeah, for me, it's actually no actually cooking. Well, the thing is, I bought a panini presser, so anything you can put in the panini presser, like a quesadilla or a hash brown, and then literally anything you can put it between a piece of bread, is honestly the best thing on earth. Like, so that's my
Totally.
thing now too.
Yeah.
Takes like a minute or two too. It's amazing.
Yeah, exactly. This is what I mean. I love time-saving devices. Yeah, so that's the little activity that I had planned. I realized I only really took up an hour of the 2-hour workshop slot, and I still will be here for the last hour to take people's questions, or like I'm very happy to talk about like building a meal plan, or like getting inspiration for meals, or anything I talked about, or even stuff I like mentioned briefly, like urban agriculture. Happy to talk about. But otherwise, yeah. Do people have any questions for me? I don't know. I didn't really think this far ahead. I thought I would be talking for longer, honestly.
Sorry, did you say that you were sending the slides by email?
Yeah, I can get in touch with the CSU people. I could even post it maybe to the Facebook. Does everyone have access to the Facebook event? Because I can post them there, or I can ask Nicole to send it out by email.
I think I didn't give my email to anyone to join. I just clicked on the link.
Okay. So if I post it in the Facebook event, will you be able to see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That sounds good. Charlie says, can you talk more about urban agriculture? Do you do it at home, or is it in a community garden? Yes, I would love to talk more about urban agriculture. So my my journey with urban agriculture at Concordia, I'm sure most people know that on the 13th floor of the hall building, there's the Concordia greenhouse. And there's actually a organization that runs kind of like, it's called an internship, but it's more of like a training. The group is called City Farm School, and you can take what's called an internship. Is basically like a set of classes where they teach you how to do urban ag, and they have like honorariums, because it's kind of expensive, but the way I was able to do it was I asked for like financial aid, and they like sliced the price for me. So that's where I learned to like grow food. That was like my first introduction to it. And then because of that experience, I was able to get a job at Centre Paul Roulant, which is another nonprofit in Montreal, whose mission statement is like, it's a Meals on Wheels program, and they kind of do a lot of stuff, but they have a rooftop garden in the plateau that they grow food on, and also a farm in Senville, which is like in the West Island of Montreal. So I was working like minimum wage and doing like urban ag. Yeah, okay, Julianne is familiar with Saint-Tropez. And that was like much more intense. And it was very like, I was working 35 hours a week there, and it was like a lot. It was during the summer, so I wasn't taking any classes at the time, but that was much more of an intense like farm experience. And since then, since moving to Verdun, which is where I live now, the tenants who transferred their lease to me have a plot in like the community gardens near like the hospital here in Verdun. And so I'm able to just basically bike there and like farm and garden there. But it's also going to be my first year container or like balcony gardening because I have the space to do it for the first time. So actually today, I think like after this workshop, I'm gonna like plan out because I have some seeds. I'm gonna plan out what I want to grow. But yeah, I have like a pretty like broad knowledge of like urban ag, but not like very specific, if that makes any sense.
Do you have any tips on some like good things to grow in the city as a beginner? Because like I have no idea where to start.
Oh yeah. So the thing to consider is I think the biggest factor for like balcony gardening is how much light your balcony is going to get. Because for things like tomatoes, which everyone wants to grow, they take a lot of sunlight, and you need to have them in a place that gets like about 8 hours of sunlight a day, which is really hard if your balcony is like east or west facing. So there's, maybe I can like look it up. I don't even know how to look it up, but there's basically like different categories of food plants that are categorized by like how much energy they need to fruit. So like there's really low energy ones, like kale, for example, is really easy to grow. And the other thing is kale is really resistant to cold. So it's nice to plant like even now in March. Whereas something like tomatoes, you would have to wait until like end of April, maybe even May to transplant into the ground. Kale is something you can start growing now. My favorite, like when people ask me like what to grow, my favorite thing to say is radishes, because radishes have a really short growing season. They only take about like 25 days to mature, depending on the variety. So you can try like several times. You can plant them at several stages during the summer to and basically get several harvests. Is there a question? Whoops. Yes, kale is great. Radishes are great. I've never tried growing carrots on a balcony, but it's very like, it's kind of really dependent on how much space you have and yeah, how much sunlight your balcony gets. Other cool things to grow. I'm trying to think. I mean, herbs, having an herb garden, I think, is underrated. Like just growing some nice basil or mint or thyme or oregano is great on your balcony. I was even considering making a little like pollinator garden, which are just like plants that pollinators like bees and other insects are a fan of. Yeah, even if it's not like food producing for me, I think it's still like nice to have. My big task this summer is going to be how to keep the squirrels away, because there's a lot of really ambitious squirrels in this neighborhood. And the ways that I've been told to deal with them are I think this one is more relevant if you have like an in-ground plot, but if you plant sunflowers like around your food plants, it's kind of like they act like as a shield, like a deterrent to them. The other way I know is what's basically pepper spray. You just take like hot pepper powder and like put it in water and spray it on like the roots of your plants, and it doesn't damage your plant, but it like when squirrels come to like gnaw at it, they are like, this is spicy, I don't like it. Yeah, Charlie says that they lost so many tomatoes to squirrels. They're like, it's a big problem with balcony gardening. Also, that's very cute that you're going to grow lavender and chamomile, Juliana. I love that. What's the other? There's like one other method, but I can't remember it right now. But like the pepper spray is like, I've heard is pretty effective. Oh, I think the last method was just like a physical barrier, which I might actually try because I have like a metal railing. So I was gonna try putting like some kind of what's it called? There's like a special kind of like gardening cloth that's like black, but it like lets sunlight in. But it's like a physical barrier basically to deter squirrels. I hope this isn't like too much of a tangent, is like actually interesting or / helpful to people.
Sorry, because I also have like a stupid question related to that. Like, do you think that works with like bunnies? Because like we have like a garden, but like there's like rabbits that like eat like our like they just like peppers.
Ooh. I actually don't know. I have never had to deal with rabbits. I'm sorry. I think a general like tip, like physical barriers, I think are a like general good way to keep things that you don't want in your garden out of your garden. It might be a little more involved with rabbits because you would need like something stronger, but yeah, bunnies are vicious. Yeah. Does anyone else have any other questions about either urban ag or food? What part of the West Island?
My dad's he's currently living in Pearful.
Oh, okay. Yes, I am familiar. Yeah, it's weird. When I lived there, I never like had the thought to garden, even though my mom had like a little backyard. But now that I'm relegated to balcony gardening, I'm like, yes, I have to do this. It's also like, I mean, I would highly recommend either making some friends that are into gardening or I don't know. It's really good to pool your resources in terms of soil and seeds, because you can save a lot of money that way, especially seeds because they come in like huge quantities that no one who has a balcony garden is ever gonna need that many seeds. And they like seeds go bad after like depending on how they're stored 3 to 5 years. So it's always fun to actually I have one right here. These are called seed catalogs, and you basically it's like a leaflet that has all the different varieties that you can buy, and you like make a an order of exactly what kind of varieties of like tomatoes or lettuce or like flowers or anything that you want. And it's really fun to go through them with friends and be like, ooh, I want to grow this.
Yeah, I'll second that about the seed booklets. Like, I'm currently visiting with my girlfriend's mom and stepfather, and her mom is like really big into community gardens, and she knew that I now had the space to garden, so she got me my own little seed book, and it's been so fun this week going through it and picking out what I'm gonna grow.
That's adorable. Yeah. Another really useful resource if people want to start gardening is called a seeding calendar, I think. which is kind of, oh my God, yeah, okay. This looks really intimidating, but yes, okay, something like this where, oh gosh. It shows you like when different variety, like different vegetables or food plants need to go like into the ground. This one's not that detailed, but I have one where, for example, it says like tomatoes are really picky about being transplanted, but they're still, because they have such a long growing season, in Montreal, which has a very like short growing season, it's almost necessary to start them indoors. So what that looks like is just taking like small pots and making seedlings, and then transplanting the seedlings outdoors when it's warm enough. And people have like really Baroque setups with like special LED lights and like, you know, whatever. And I'm totally not into doing any of that. And I think I might have like just given up on doing tomatoes altogether because they're really finicky. But yeah, so there's like these calendars that basically like tell you when to plant things, and they should be specific to, if not the city, then at least like what part of the world you're in, because that, you know, the climate affects basically this entire schedule. I know in Montreal, the like people usually start their seedlings indoors around February and March, and they usually start transplanting into the ground depending on the weather. And it's been like warmer in recent years because of climate change, but usually like end of April, beginning of May, things go into the ground. And then, you know, entire growing season, and then depending on what you're growing, you can have several rotations. So things like I mentioned radishes, the same plot that you use for the radishes, you can then like once you harvest them halfway through the growing season, you can replace, like you can then directly seed, say like carrots or, you know, kale or whatever. And yeah, usually like the last harvest in Montreal is around September, possibly October, but depending. So yeah. Hope this is not too off topic. But I just wanted to say thank you everyone for coming and for participating. It feels nice to meet new people, which I don't get to do a lot. Yeah, unless anyone else has any other things to ask or say, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you, Tally, like on behalf of like myself as a participant, but also like on behalf of the CSU. Like this was an amazing workshop, and it's going to be such a great resource just for people to have and to look back to. And I like, even though like I love cooking, like I learned so many new things, and I thought it was really great. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Yeah, it will be, I guess because it was recorded, it'll be posted to YouTube. So if you didn't get a chance to like take notes or, you know, just want to look back, then you will have that there as well. So thank you, everyone. I guess I'm going to close it off here.
Thanks, Tally.
Yeah. Take care, everyone.